So here we go. So there's a few questions that Master Ty has for me. What's the first one? Shoot.
All right, first question. I started my training in my first tournament.
Wait, hold on a second. So you trained with J.B. the Puppet, who J.B. the Puppet, when I met him, literally, it wasn't because of just martial arts, it was his dance. That guy was a real good dancer. I remember there was a competition, and they called him the Old Man. The Old Man came out and did some dancing, and I'm going back to Clown, Boogie Down Bronx, Clown, legendary dancer. I think Mr. Freeze was there, so it might have been at a Disco Fever or one of those places like that he went. So when I met him, he was teaching, rest in peace, my man, Ernest Ramos. And Ernest and I go back to second grade.
Wow.
We were second grade together. So when I saw JB, when I saw you for the first time, it was with great Grandmaster Aaron Banks, who had an event at the County Hall.
Yep.
Yeah, and this guy did something that was crazy. To me, it was nuts. At the top of a ladder, because they told him to get on top of a ladder, and he did like a suicide from there. He landed on his leg. I thought it broke the leg. He got up and still bowed out. And about another 10 minutes after that, he was fighting, and I was refereeing, which is kind of crazy. But so, what did you guys train at?
Whole lot of training in the park.
In the park.
We did have a
Shaolin Temple in the park. Talk about. Come on, talk about that.
That's exactly what it felt like, because pretty much most of the training we was always in different parks. You know, my first one when I came in, because I came in around '89. You know, I was about 13 years old. So I'm coming in the game. They already came from other locations. I'm over there in Claremont Park is where I started, running over in the streets over to 183rd Street, because they had a little joint with Grandmaster Lee in the basement.
You guys were like in China or Japan in the wilderness in the trees. And what kind of exercises you did over there?
Fireman carry, walking on your hands.
Bear walk.
You know, that was a lot of military stuff, because I did some knowledge on it over the years. And I said, what made them choose these exercises? Because I went to other schools, they wasn't even doing half of them.
You know what's interesting? This is where a lot of people just don't get. Martial arts are military arts. So in the military, you have special forces. So you was doing like some special forces training or boot camp training. You know, I'm sure this is the way it was, guys. In order for you to join the school, it was like you were joining the clan. And they would, and they put you through some hazing.
Uh-huh.
You had to do how many jumping jacks?
Every belt you had it up a couple thousand.
Yeah. Imagine that. I mean, just doing 100 jumping jacks is a lot, right? So you do 100 jumping jacks to get in or something like that. Whatever it was, man.
Sit-ups, jacks. Oh yeah.
And it's really
it was more mind,
psychological.
Yeah.
It's psychological to break you down.
And some of the people, you know, they came in and they attempted to do it, you know. Came in, I brought my cousin in, I brought a couple of people in, and they decided to do it. Some finished it, you know, and some said, I ain't even doing one. See you later, alligator.
Yeah, so it was almost like, was he charging for this?
No. These are free classes.
Yeah, so this is a guy from the community who did whatever business he did, and then turned around and tried to help the kids in the community by training them. But in reality, it's almost like you create your little clan, your little gang, your little posse, your little crew of people.
We call it the combat team, yeah, or the mountain men, and yeah, we had a great time because it felt like I was straight in Shaolin Temple. The exercises was rough.
So what would happen when it would rain?
Out there too in the rain.
In the snow?
Out there too. Sometimes just playing, what do you call it, football. But yeah, I got used to it. And then after when I got older,
you guys were there all 4 seasons.
Yeah. And then after a while, when I got a little older, it would rain one day and my body said, I went home.
You got an umbrella.
And I was like.
And you didn't go back.
I was so cold. I said, why am I so cold? I said, because you're older now, your body changed, you know, and you're out there trying to exercise in the rain, sweating and the gears all wet.
So give me an idea how you guys were I know the forms are like long forms, like 100 and something moves.
Yeah, the forms was like the shortest form. Kata 1 was about maybe That was about maybe 70, 75 moves.
75 moves, and you have to remember all the moves, right? And you're doing this out in the park, basically.
Yeah.
And so we talking about hip hop martial arts.
You already know. Go over to his job. We playing basketball, because he worked in one of the schools over there near Excel School.
Okay.
And so we over there playing ball. It was awesome because he was also into the boxing and also into the dancing. So, we had the best of both worlds. It was fun.
It's interesting because, like I said, going back to Taft High School in the Boogie Down Bronx, that's where Ernest Ramos and I met up again.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, his wife was the first one that was pregnant. And when she was pregnant, we started a food fight and he had to protect her. Just in case. It was kind of interesting. But I remember a day where we went right here to Jackson Projects and there was a center there and there was this guy named Jabba, Billy Bryant. Years after, known as Billy Bryant. And he had his crew. And then Master JB had his crew. And I wasn't there as an independent, but I remember I had my probably my black colored leagues. And I was there as a spectator, and then JB asked me if I wanted to get down. I said, hell yeah, and I got down. And I remember I was sparring some kid from Hawk Fraser School. And but when JB and Billy Bryant started fighting Jabba, and Jabba was like further down, it's like Cypress Avenue. It was like similar to what he was doing, but they actually had a place where they trained at, a center. And I remember JB doing back like crooked, but no back handspring in the middle of the fight. Like it was crazy. Like he tried to hit them with like a cartwheel maybe, and the guy was behind. It was just like
like something you've seen in the movie.
Kung Fu, man. People with characters, and JB, man's my man, but he what a character. That guy, to this very day, he has the energy. People say, I got energy. That guy got some energy. He's always been in shape. I know so out of shape.
And that's what helped me when I went to high school. It helped me really knock out. I got some awards for actually physical fitness because when I heard of some of the stuff he was doing, I was like, what? What did you do? He was like, yeah. And I went up all these stairs and I had about 1,000 or something stairs and I tried to get up there as fast as I can. And I'm like, what? So I said, this is why we always got to do jumping jacks. And then we got a couple thousand more every time you go up in rank. I said, one time I tried that after I took a break. And I tried to do like about 4,000 jumping jacks. And my calves was hurting for a whole week.
4,000 jumping jacks. That's insane. Anyway, so when you and I met, when you participated in our first seminar, it was 2016. So we're talking about 9 years ago.
Oh yeah.
What was the difference of what you? Yeah, and what was the difference? That was over at Sensei, the Fighting Irish, John O'Leary School on the Bruckner Boulevard.
Yeah, Bruckner Boulevard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
So that was I was living in New Jersey at the time. I had a school in New Jersey, and I came down to do a sniper fighting seminar. What was the difference? And what even enticed you to even participate in that?
Well, I had an awesome time coming over there. I know that Grandmaster always spoke highly of you, and I remember just coming over when I worked for Lucia Roberts, coming over to one of your schools over here on 140-something Street. And I said, wow. And I said, he's close to me. I said, let me go get some lessons because I just like training with other people. That was just me. I got in trouble for it too. But I was just that type. I always wanted to improve my skill sets, So I said, if I didn't go to the military like he did, I said, let me go learn some more about Kung Fu,
Wow.
Let me go learn more about what I'm doing.
So your desire to learn made you get in trouble by cross-training. Because that was a no-no. They would call you a rebel.
Right.
You wasn't allowed to do that. But in your case, you was like, hey,
yeah,
I want to just learn from anybody.
And it would just naturally happen. Like James Singleton, he was doing Taekwondo. I met Ralphie. I was already sparring with his dudes at the tournaments. And I'm walking by 170 Grand Concourse, and I'm like, yo, it's a school over here. I look down there in the basement. I said, that's the guy who took first place, championship. So I went in there. I said, yo, what up? So it was just like, he said, I used to train with JB too. I said, yo, I'm coming down here. Told the fellas, yo, let's come down here and train with him. And we just...
See, that's the thing that people don't understand. Those of you watching, you may not be from New York City. But in New York City, in basements, in parks, in PALs, and
community centers.
Community centers, You talk in people's homes. I mean, Ernest Ramos had a school inside of an apartment. Okay,
Facts.
so the school was right there on Walton Avenue.
Yeah.
And in McClellan, going down the hill, and it was also a dust block. That block has dust. They used to sell dust there too, not just weed, dust.
That's where I met Masuko too. Did you know that? I met him right there inside Ernest School. He was in there doing Wing Chun. I forgot the name of the master that was doing Wing Chun.
Well, he is a trained Rest in Peace with George Vascones.
Yeah,
George Vascones was a dancer with a group called the Latin Symbolics. These guys, we're talking about legendary, and then he became the manager with Sparkle Management, with all the top freestyle singers, most of them. You know, talking about Judy Torres and Cynthia and freaking Johnny O and two of our hats and a whole bunch of people that Suave that he managed. Wow. You know? But very good martial artists too. They all trained with Reno Morales.
Yes.
So Reno was part of it. So just giving some props of New York style of martial arts. But New York style of martial arts had a Shaolin flavor to it because these guys were characters. And of course there was a character named Fast Feet, and that was me being, and they've always had. What did you know about me? Because people always talk some crazy stuff about me. Because I used to compete.
I remember we went up to 180 something Street over there near Broadway. It was like a seminar happening. I remember seeing one of the guys from the Jiu-Jitsu there, and you happened to be there that day. And I can't remember everything, but I just remember, okay, we going up there. I didn't know what we was doing. It was ever a demo or something. So it was in a ceremony, awards. I said, just be ready forever, because that's normally how we roll. We get there, and he would tell us what we're going to do at the demo once we get there.
So basically, see, I came up from Tiger Kim's, right? And Tiger Kim's was on Fordham Road in the Bronx. That was the main street. So I didn't come up from the ghetto, so to speak, when it comes to YMCA's and PALs. My mother wanted to put me in the professional martial arts school, so when my father's VA check, I was able to do that. So when I started seeing ghetto martial arts, it kind of threw me off because I remember going to tournaments and everyone was dressed in a white uniform, and it was professional. Then I went to a tournament in 1979 in the PAL in Webster Avenue, and it was ghetto. And I was like, oh, and I like the ghetto too, because I'm from the ghetto. So it was almost like I had to be two people. Yeah, it had to be two people. You know how to say yes, sir, and being respectful, but you learn that in the martial arts. But
like
I'm telling you,
for that.
Yeah, basically, I would leave the ghetto and then go to Fordham Road where I was around white people, because those are white people, my neighborhood, not too many of them, they already had moved out. And it was interesting because then when I would come back to the ghetto, so to speak, Fordham Road was like uptown. That was the uptown area, meaning that it was like that's where people shopped. You had Alexander's. It was like
Lowest Paradise.
Yeah. Lowest Paradise when I seen the first movie, Five Fingers of Death. But anyway, so when I went to Taft High School, I started hearing about these people that are training in places. So we went over to this at nighttime in a lot of schools. They used to do what was called night gym, or what they called it,
Fight night or something like that.
Shop. I forgot what it was called, but it was like basically they used to open up the gym, and you could go play there basketball or play ping pong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was called night.
Like a recreation.
It was like
night?
It was the recreation night.
Yeah.
But they always had a room where they would teach you karate. So I heard that there was a place up in Boston Road where a bunch of karate instructors were using like it was a cafeteria, and you would go there. And in this corner they were doing Taekwondo, in that corner they were doing Goju, in that corner they were doing Shotokan, in that corner, and there was a whole bunch of people in one freaking place, and I was like, whoa! And I saw Reno Morales. He had like a denim uniform, and I trained with this guy named his name was Dennis Alicia, Malicious. That was his nickname, Malicious. And people had nicknames, and he had some real good kicks. And I went there and worked out one time, maybe two times, and then I started my own little crew, and there was two of us that came with us. So I said we were the terrorists. We're gonna be the new terrorists, and I started teaching in the basement in my old neighborhood.
And there was a time too when you got together with Jonas and Nunez, and when you started out too, right? before he
So
started?
no, so what? Okay, so Jonas Nunes. I met Jonas. I want to say it was 1979, and it was Louis Trujillo, who was the guy I looked up to over at Tiger Kim's. So I'm known as Little Louis. And literally, we go to a tournament, but we're not supposed to go to this tournament because we only have to go to tournaments with the school. They were supposed to be just Taekwondo tournaments. But we were becoming. I was part of the Rebels now, so I'm only 12 years old, but I'm hanging out with the older guys, you know, and that was big because for you to hang out, you know, actually I was 13, 1979. I'm 13 years old. So at age 13, I go to this tournament, and I see these people talking back to the judges. Again, it was ghetto. It was the PAL. But I met Jonas in one of those tournaments where we drove away and everybody came back. With, you know, it was like one little car with like 6 of us in the car, and then we had the trophies. You know, so that was back in '79. And then in 1980, I saw him in December of 1980, and this was at a martial arts tournament. I want to say it was in Printing High School, if not Printing Park West, because they were across the street from each other. I get confused which one it was, but I saw Jonas there with these Kempo gloves. He had a brown belt on, and he was fighting different. And I remember him because I named Jonas. Is not something that I was used to. And they said, "Come down and work out with me in the basement." He had his parents lived in Decatur, and way up there in the Bronx. So the last stop of the D train, and so I started training with him. But when I met him, I was a red belt, and he was a green belt. But when I saw him again, he was a brown belt, and just a few years after, and I went to my first tournament again December, but I was afraid to wear my brown belt. I was already brown belt. I had stopped training for a little while, and I was afraid to wear my brown belt because I was going to this tournament and they were throwing punches to the head. Taekwondo had no punches to the head, so basically I was scared. So I said, you know what? Let me just wear my green belt, which technically was cheating, but that's what I did. And then when I'm training with him, what I did was it took about a year before I put the brown belt right on myself.
I started learning how to strike more.
Yeah, what happened was that I started looking at Karate Illustrated, and I noticed that these people was in a different posture, and I wanted to copy them. They're the top fighters. You know, the top fighter was Keith Vitale. And then Steve Nasty Anderson was the next up and coming fighter, and then close to us there was a guy named Larry Kelly, who was rated in the top 10. And I actually saw Larry Kelly fight at Earl Brennan's tournament and leaving high school, and he did a pop-up hook kick fadeaway on a guy named Abdul Matakaber, who was phenomenal fighter. So these guys were like the superheroes. But again, going back to my personal, I was afraid to wear the belt, so I wore the green belt most of 1981, and then towards the end I wore a purple belt, but it wasn't purple, it was like lavender. And I was winning a lot, you know, of the junior underbelt. And I got to the point where I said, you know, I want to test my skills at one of these national tournaments. So the U.S. Open was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I told them, hey, let's go down there. So we took the Greyhound bus to Florida. And at this time, he's a black belt, and I'm wearing my purple belt, but I did forms in the intermediate division. I took first place in forms, but I made it up on the spot. But I took first place in forms, and they gave me this big 6-foot trophy. I couldn't believe it. And then fighting, they allowed me to fight black belts. So I fought what was considered super juniors, which is red, brown, and black, which is the division where I should have been in. So that was my whole thing, where I didn't have confidence, but I still would fight if they allowed me to fight up. But by the time that happened, I took first place fighting, first place forms. My name came out in Karate Illustrated. Man, I lost my mind.
Wow.
I lost my mind. Even though the first time I actually won the first place at the tournament was in Westchester County Arena in 1976, but that was strictly Taekwondo. It was different.
That's when I was born.
Well, but in your case, what kind of tournaments were you competing at? Was it Banks tournaments? Was it?
Most of the tournaments I was going to, I think the first tournament I actually went to was with Lamar Thornton, Crescendo Lamar, in Bronx Community College.
So that was a pretty big tournament. That was sponsored by Budweiser, in the sense that they gave the money as part of the community center because he was teaching in the YMCA on 135th Street, I believe. So again, New York had these hardcore underground tournaments, and sometimes it got a little violent. You know, well, quite often because it was almost like gangs, right?
Yeah, I remember going to a tournament, right? And I went to this particular tournament, and one of the teachers was going to fight his student or something like that. I'm like, yo, what's going on? They was arguing about something, and I'm like, yeah, you never know what to expect.
See, that's why I couldn't understand that because I come from Taekwondo, and like you don't even speak back to your master instructor. So it was a whole rude awakening for me, you know. But then it was interesting because at some point I became the rebel from New York. Where everybody was fighting in one particular style. I can show you guys videos. I'm 16 years old and I'm doing shuffles in the middle of the ring, and I'm doing jumping, spinning hooks combined with some fadeaway back flips, but doubling it. I'm wearing the equipment on, but we weren't allowed to hit to the face. But my equipment was all busted because I always trained in the dungeons, and that's when I started realizing you can go to Feather Belt Lane and you could train there. You know, again, going back to Reno Morales, and you can go to oh man,
a lot of places, right?
Yeah, in the bottom of churches. You know, we're talking about big. You can walk through blocks in the South Bronx and not realize that in that church, in the basement, they're training, and that community center, they're training and training and training, and people training all over.
Yeah, when I went to Harlem, I was seeing Master Mo. I didn't even know he was in some of the churches right there because I was born in Harlem, and I went up the block one day and I
was born in Spanish Harlem.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm 119 between 2nd and 3rd is where, you know, I lived until from 1966 until 1971 when we moved up to the Bronx. But I was born in the Mount Sinai Hospital.
Wow. Yeah, Spanish Harlem. You right there. So
And what hospital you was born in?
Harlem Hospital, right there, 135th. And I was just going through there one day, and I
remember the joint disease was on 25th. Joint disease was the hospital.
And then, you know, a little further up right there on Lenox Avenue, they had all the other instructors there, and right across from Menacing Townhouse, they had a big gym over there where they used to give dances. And there's about 6 instructors in there teaching in different.
Wow. That's what I mean. So they had that up there in West Farm Square.
Oh, wow.
There was a school, West Farm Square, which is Boston Road, and that's where I saw all these instructors in one freaking place doing the same thing.
Yeah, so they on that side.
Yeah. It was just pick a corner.
Self-defense on that side.
Pick a corner.
You know what I'm saying?
And when you look at it, it was either the lunchroom or gym.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Word. And I had a great time because I went in there. One of the brothers, he was teaching us self-defense. And it was funny, though, because he would just call it self-defense, but it was very interesting. Not funny, but it was very interesting to me because he didn't put label on it, but he was just trying to show you some practical self-defense applications, even though I seen a little 52, and then I seen some other elements from military self-defense. Right. And I said, I like what you're doing, brother. And I actually bumped into him about maybe a year ago, and he said he's still teaching. So, yeah, man.
But again, that was the underground world as far as I go. And I used to make sure that I fought at the underground tournaments. Great Grandmaster Aaron Banks through most of them. And then T. Dalton over in the 138th Street at Mitchell Gym. And then you had, of course, you had
T. Dalton.
You had Lamar Thornton throwing one of the bigger ones. And then before you was involved in martial arts, they had events going back to 1980. 81, and the big tournaments were the Ying Yi Kwans. There was 3 tournaments that was done in Brooklyn, Bishop Fort High School, and that's when I had a chance to see. I went to the dungeon tournaments just for my so-called ghetto reputation to make sure it was intact.
Right.
I used to hear the guys like, yeah, they never come over here to compete. You know, like Nasty Anderson is gonna go to, why? That's what I'm thinking. They're in the magazines, they rich. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
But eventually, Nasty comes down to Lamar Thornton's tournaments, and even Ray McCallum, rest in peace, he came down to Lamar Thornton's tournament, and I started seeing some of these people from the magazines actually come to some of these tournaments because they started giving away some money.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And but my whole thing was that I'm gonna go over there and see, test my skills, and I can honestly say that I had an opportunity to work out with some people, and I learned some stuff because Billy Blank showed me how to blitz, Nasty Anderson showed me how to do the dive bomb, and then in 1985, I was an assistant to the greatest fighter of all time, according to many, which is Joe Louis, and he was Bruce Lee's student. So I was like, you know what? I'm learning from Bruce Lee. It's the closest thing. And I learned how to fake and reposition. And when I did that, it completely changed my game, man. And so, at the age of 18 years old, by the time I'm 19 years old, I was doing things that people just didn't. Like, they used to just stand there, and I was always moving around, doing some fakes and angles like that, just part of a rhythm. But when I knew that it was systematized or mathematical, I was like, yo, I got into that thing.
Right. And why do you think people like sometimes limit their approach to it?
Because it's a style. So if I instructor teaches you, you know, if you did something that wasn't part of what he taught you, you might get yelled at. You know, if you do something silly. And I should say, maybe not so much with JB, but if you're doing Shotokan, that's a specific curriculum. If you're doing Goju, that's a specific curriculum. So if you cross over to something else, it's not part of the curriculum, so they want to put you back to the style.
Yeah, when I went to Alpha Omega Taekwondo, 170 Concourse, I remember certain techniques we was doing. He was like, you can't do that. I think at the time we were so used to hitting in the face, you know, almost like the day you was refereeing. They were telling us we couldn't hit in the face. I said, what do you think we trained for? I said, I would hit anyway because I just messed up my foot too.
So that's the confusing part of it, because you have martial arts and then they had a sport that came from martial arts. And that sport that came from martial arts started back in 1963, the first martial arts tournament that I know of. And that ended up becoming, years after, the USK Grand Nationals by Robert Trias, who had the first martial arts school in America, supposedly in 1947 in Arizona. And so when I'm reading the magazines, I'm looking at those guys. I see top fighters like, again, Keith Vitale, Super Dan Anderson, Ray McCallum, Nasty Anderson, Billy Blanks, you know, Larry Kelly. And to me, all those people were like, they were in the magazines. They were on the covers. They were the covers. I'm like, they like the professionals to me. And then, you know, so we did what they call point karate, but the intentions of becoming a full contact fighter. That was the key. That
was the goal.
That was the dream. Like Superfoot Waters and Jeff Smith and those guys from the PKA and Benny Akitas, of course.
Yeah.
So these guys were superheroes, but I had never met them at the time. Now I've probably met just about all of those guys and had some great experiences, even with someone like Mike Stone, which is the first martial arts superstar. He came over to the school and did a seminar, and that was back in the 1990s. But anyway,
it was an amazing journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Anyway, but going back to you, again, what we're doing is having a conversation because some of you guys see Master Ty, but you don't know anything about him. So I get a chance to, you know, get some of his background. So let's just fast forward to 2016, you come to a seminar and you learn some stuff. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was all in. I was excited because I was running around trying to develop a system. I had tried, you know, working out with the bartenders. They do the street workout. One of the first, shout out to Giant, doing the pull-ups and all that. And I said, yo, I'm already working out in the bar. So I said, this naturally, you know, I seen what they was doing, the music. I was into the hip-hop. Let me go see what this is about, because this might be another way that I could stay in shape and learn something new. So I naturally was just doing that. I seen something, and if it was vibing with me, let me go train over there. So I did that, and like I said, when I came down to work out with you, I was like, yo, is the seminar going down? Okay, I can get there easily, because I couldn't get down to Billy Blanks yet to go down to get that Tabo certification. So when I knew you were doing yours.
At the time you was working at Lucille Roberts?
Lucille Roberts, Bally's, yeah. I wound up getting my certification with Ernie Ray's team and with the cardio kickboxing, you know, because it was closer to me. And finally, it was within my budget too at the time. So I just went and got that, and then I said, oh yeah, I can learn more about sniper fighting. Let me go over there. You know, and I already heard so much about you from Elder Supreme, or Master JB.
That's my man.
Yeah, and he always spoke highly of you, you know. So when he seen you again, like about, what's that, 2 years ago, a year ago?
Yeah, he lost his mind.
Remember when he didn't realize it was you?
Yeah, I was on the phone.
Right.
Yeah, so it seems like I was having, okay, so basically I was an urban legend. The Fasty character became like its own entity. And they remember that Fasty kid because that kid literally was one of the few that was throwing kicks and doing things just different. Mm-hmm. But he fought everybody, anybody. And they respect that. Older guys always respect the kids who actually go up there and do things. Like in this block, I got a reputation because I beat somebody up in '85 who was a bully, right there in the street. And and the same thing, I got a reputation because that same year, Pan Am had there was a strike at Pan American Airlines, and literally I was a guy who, the youngest guy who was helping. I was helping them situate the situations and escalate. Yeah, and it got escalated real quick. But the guy got out of line. They we'll go back online. He was giving somebody a hard time, and I was pissed off already because I wanted to just. So I hit him. I hit him, and what they did, what I thought I was gonna get fired. What they did was they made me a supervisor. They gave me a call and everything. So Jonas and I and the whole crew didn't have to take the train. So these guys like this young kid is crazy, like we like him. Why he's crazy, Because for me the karate tournaments was one thing, but it's not really fighting because fighting is in the street, and in the street there's no rules.
Right.
And not that I fought a lot in the street because my reputation preceded me. I was always a cool guy, but it did take two situations as a little kid for me to escalate my martial arts because I'm saying this thing ain't working. I got a black guy one time, in a fight, and then I got my nose broken, and I was 13 in another fight, and that's like, I said, you know what, it's time to start training. Like, for real.
Right,
Why?
Right.
The Taekwondo they had, I didn't know how to punch. I knew how to kick, but once they get past the kicks and to the punch, I was done. I would turn around.
For me, it was a little different because I came up, we was naturally slap boxing in the neighborhood, So even like when I was working out with Elder Supreme, we was doing a lot of calisthenics. But naturally on the block, we was just, I don't even remember where it came from, but we naturally wanted to throw hands. Like, come on.
Now that's interesting because I was pretty good with slap boxing. In the meantime, I didn't integrate it when I was doing the martial arts. Stupid. Because I was always been athletic. I was always really fast. Mm-hmm. But again, I shouldn't say that. Because this was probably after I got my nose broken. I'm 13 years old, 14 years old now. I'm 14 years old. I moved to a new neighborhood. And I ended up having a fight with this guy who was like the hooky player. Like he was like the thug. And I'm kicking him, embarrassing him. And then he threw a punch, hit me in my nose. My big nose went over here. And it kind of messed up my reputation. But to me, I was like, you know what?
Never again.
Never, ever, ever again. So I started training. Really, really hard, and I was back. And then we moved back to this neighborhood in 1981. And at this point, I was already a maniac.
Yeah, I think that's where I started learning more about boxing too. Because I think I went to Mo's school one time, and he was training some kickboxers. And I remember he said, "Yo, we sparring, whatever." So we went up there, and I did some sparring, and I just remember I got hit so hard. I didn't think we was hitting this hard, but okay. And I said, and I remember after that, I said, okay, now we got to train more on the hands, from the kickboxing. Because sometimes, when you go there with other brothers, you think it's just, we just going to tap a little bit, what I'm saying? We're going to hurt each other.
See, this is the difference. When you're training in the dojo or in the park or what have you, you don't have equipment on, right? So you're opening your hand.
Yeah.
And you hit it into the stomach, or maybe, in other words, it's like controlled. But then when you go work out with people who are competitive, they got on gloves, they got on mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Like they're there to do what would be rounds, whether it's point karate or full contact or MMA. They're not, so it's more intense.
Yeah, actually could be, Grandmaster Trent, he actually would bring his stuff up and put everything on head, mouth, feet. Because JB, him and Elder Supreme used to go at it too. So I said, you know what? I told my team, let's start doing that. And then we would start actually going a little harder. I would meet up with them at Claremont Park, and we would put everything on, and it definitely changed the game.
So it was different levels, but did you have gloves on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
again, and
Yeah, because that all that exercise that we used to have to go through, I could definitely feel, like I said, and then I could definitely feel like we would just do splits and everything would just get better.
You were just stronger.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
could feel the intensity. So I said, yeah, man, we got to start suiting up. Like
Cool.
we at the tournament.
So again, going back to 2016, you learned some of the sniper fighting, formerly known as Fontanez, sport karate, etc. And what stuck out?
A lot of the drills was a lot different. I was like, whoa, what's this? Making sure I got the right hand when we was doing the drills going forward. And then I came out of it and I said, I did a little bit of the techniques, some of them already, but this was really good because it was more practical, the way you explained it, how to do it. And I said, this is cool because I played around with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like we were talking about jamming the other day. And I was sitting here going through the files and I said, yeah, but then when you told me the other day, it was the whole art. So it was just almost like that light bulb went off. Ding, let me get some more of it, like you in the candy store. So pretty much it was good that you explained it like that because I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't even know about jamming,
Yeah,
and that being a whole style by itself.
It's a whole style because if someone was a kicker, you can't be at their kicking range because they're going to hit you. So you have to jam them, meaning bridge the gap and eliminate that long weapon and hit them with a short weapon. But sometimes you have to spin. So it's almost like a football player wanted to go through that line, and they're big, so they have to become small. And when they become small, they jam you, as in if you're getting ready to shoot, somebody just grabs,
Like a neutralizer.
So it neutralizes you. But it was a whole style.
And then you did the calisthenics too, so that was another great thing too with the seminar. Because I was already doing the stuff like your brother was with the bartenders. So once I started doing the other drills and you were showing us how to add that with the sniper fight, I said, yo.
I think the biggest thing that was different that I learned when I trained with Joe Lewis was the fakes and repositions. I was like, wow, it makes sense. Like, why be in the line of fire? So everybody used to fight, they would be in the line of fire, and then they would reposition, they're still in the line of fire. So how to create an angle while still hitting, which I learned that, believe it or not, from playing pool. In pool, you have to have the angles. In basketball, you have to know the angles. You have to know, so when I heard the word sport karate, I'm saying, man, I'm good at sports. Maybe I can implement some of these things in here.
Yeah. You have to, yeah.
Yeah, they work. But I can honestly say that at this point, I've seen the revolution of martial arts and the destruction of many of the concepts. And it's sad to me because a lot of the elders are they have a foot in the grave already, man. I'm like, listen, if you got a foot in the grave, just take the foot out of the grave. If you're going to end up going in the grave anyway, but go in there in a smaller grave, In other words, let's get in shape. And I've attempted that a number of times, and life's gotten in the way. But one thing that makes me sad is that people just don't know the techniques. Like it's a lost art. The lost art of sniper fighting.
I've seen that happen in a lot of kung fu systems too, where sometimes they have older arts that they used to have, and sometimes a lot of people don't know about it, and it's important that we preserve certain things, especially for the new generation.
If it works, if it's effective, why discard it? Bruce Lee said, keep what works.
And disregard.
And discard whatever, which means disregard what doesn't work. So, obviously, you and I have been sparring recently quite often. And the right hand reverse punch has probably been the one that is pretty consistent. And you can't get more basic than a reverse punch to the body. But the approaches can be almost unlimited.
Right.
So what do you think about those options that you have now?
It's just amazing because, like I said, you have multiple ways of approaching it, and it's always good to have options versus just think it's one way. Like I was just going through a lot of my training in other systems, and I was acknowledging that, wow, okay, they do it like this, but now I get to understand more about it. Like you said, once you're always a student. So it just had me to go back, understand the fouls, make sure I get back in the game because you know, a lot of that stuff I put down for a while, and I just said, yo, well, might as well. You're 49 years young, so keep to it. You know, get back in the game.
So most people don't know what a blitz is, what a dive bomb is.
Or they confused about it.
Yeah, the reason I called it sniper fighting, it was back in 2014, was because at the time I was doing seminars all over the world actually, and I used to call it real sport karate.
Real.
And I'm like, man, I don't want to sound like an old player hater, you know? So I thought about the movie Star Wars.
I thought you was gonna say Warriors.
No, Star Wars. They
Star Wars.
had a prequel. It was the first time that I saw, unless they have in other movies, but that's the first one that was significant, where they went back in time and gave the prequel. We always had sequels. We never had prequels.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
So I was like, wow. And at the time, I was already completely, put it like this, in 1997, I did a documentary to try to preserve what was the quality of sport karate, because things that was happening was going insane. The last time I saw the sport roar to the highest level on the national circuit, it was 1985. By 1986, everything went to hell in a handbag, man.
Wow.
Because it took a while longer for it to happen locally, but all of a sudden, there was no sweep. If you went to different parts of the country, you had to worry about the groin kick.
Yeah.
They got rid of the groin kick.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go up to Region 12, which was Massachusetts area, because they had groin kicks. Because there's a lot of Kempo styles up there.
Now, what about the time you was fighting in that tournament and that guy did that technique to your head? Remember, you was showing me, and he was coming at you. He had the mask on, and you went to the floor, and he tried to stomp your face.
Oh, no, that's Grandmaster Sam McGee. That was different. Okay, so you're talking about when I almost got killed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So point karate intensity was really, really intense when you fought in New York City, and I had to make sure I kept my reputation in New York. So I'm fighting a gentleman who I used to fight against his son, who was maybe a year older than me, give or take, and it was bad enough fighting him. Now I got to fight the father, and I go through a hook kick, and he grabs me and throws me to the ground. In other words, he jammed me. See, he jammed me. Threw me to the ground and stomped and missed me by as much, and he stomped again, and you hear boom, boom. So even though it was point karate, it was freaking, the point was they're going to knock you out, break your rib, crack your face. And he had his jaw broken actually, I think a year before that, by, I believe, Trent Norman or somebody from the Ninja Turtles that exists from New Jersey.
Oh.
And yeah, but the national circuit was different. Let's just say that the regional, in New York, everything was hardcore, but not too much movement. Where I moved more than most people. Mm-hmm. When I went to the national tournament as an adult, again, going back to 1985, which was a significant year, because that year I was rated and I went to my first international tournament. Mm-hmm. Meaning I crossed the border to Canada. And we took a bus, a train, no, actually, the subway to the plane to a bus to go over to Canada. Rest in peace, Little K, Kevin Thompson, myself and Tony Morrison with a roommate. We got to the border and they sent me back. I had no ID. And we never carried ID in New York City.
They sent you back?
Yeah, because they said Canada will let you in, but if you try to get back to the United States, they're going to let you in when you get to customs.
Oh, yeah.
So I went home and I took the bus to the plane to the train, and I got my ID and I went right back. Tony Morrison didn't have that's when I found out he was Jamaican. His name was Emil Pottinger, and Little K's name wasn't Little K. It wasn't Kevin Thompson. His name was Kevin Brown. I was like, what the hell? You with people you don't even know who you with, you know? So that was significant. And so that was my first tournament, international. When I went up there, I lost to a guy named Jeff Gears. But I hit him with a hook kick that he feels to this very day, according to him. And Scorpion Barrage was distracting me. And these guys that, again, I read in the magazine. even though he was rated in Region 7 and I was rated in Region 11, and we wasn't supposed to fight in the first round, my ego was more like, man, if he, you know, I didn't say nothing. Even though I probably should have, because he beat me. And I was so upset. And then I saw my boy, because they said that there was a movie coming out, a movie star, and I saw Tyrone, him and I. Tyrone was my real first partner. Him and I, you know, used to go to tournaments all the time, and then Tony Morrison was the second one.
You ever went to any tournaments and saw Michael Jai White?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a teenager, him and I fought for Lamar Thornton's. It was a grand championship for juniors.
Wow.
And I beat him, but my gosh, I was scared of him because he was like a man. I was like a skinny little freaking twig, and this guy was like a big dude.
You know what's so crazy? Because they said he was doing the same thing. He was sparring with other grown men.
Oh, he did. But he looked like a grown man. I mean, he was a big dude. You know, but Mike was about. I think by the time he was 13, 14, he was as big as he is now, just about.
No.
Not muscular, but big. You know. And then, yeah, I think we fought in '85. We fought in '85 again. Mike came in and he beat Jonas. And at the time, people thought Jonas was my instructor because I said, you know, he gave me my first belt, but he gave me my first belt from around his waist. That's the I'm fighting black belt, so he gave me the belt. So I do.
What's your age level with Michael Jai White? Is he older than you?
No, he's a year and a half or so younger.
Okay.
So when we fought, I was 15, I believe, and he was 13. But again, looking like he was 25.
Wow.
You know, great person, one of my best friends. But going back to what happened now to your sparring? What do you think?
Well,
I don't think you're really sure.
Yeah. It's been a I would just say very good thing to my brain because I'm doing stuff that I don't normally do, you know, and I like it because it's all the stuff that I normally would do. I'll just have more options now, you know, and then it just allows me to expand, you know, out what my defense and stuff like that.
In order for me to score on him now, I have to set him up at high levels because if I do the okey doke, I mean, my rib right now is injured, and he didn't even get to lock his knee. He just brushed off of his heel, and I didn't even realize how hurt I was. It's been now 4 weeks tomorrow. You know, I'm gonna press charges. The guy here.
Thank you, Lord, for healing. Jesus.
I think that the curriculum works and it's systematized. And most people don't realize because most schools, you don't go to a school where they have a style for the sparring. You just spar.
That reminds me of what what's the name said when he got hit. He said when he got knocked down, what's the name? Zab Judah. He said they don't teach you how to, you know, what to do when you get knocked down.
It's funny because Zab Judah was actually one of the students. Him and his brother trained in the Brooklyn School with Exotic props to Jean-Claude Lewiston. He was the teacher. But I thought that this conversation was a pretty important conversation. A lot of people saying, "Who is that guy?" Because they're like, you know, you came out of left field in the sense of what other people. Because they say, I don't remember him in the '90s. No, there's a gentleman who took a seminar with me in 2016. Even though I met him before that as a referee, and his instructor and I go way back to the early '80s. And you know, these guys were pretty much, you know, the ghetto masters of martial arts that were in the parks and the rooftops and the basements, anywhere you went. These guys trained like Shaolin monks, man. And I always respected that. My whole thing was more like sparring. And it was because that's how I made my money. My boys were stick-up kids, and I wanted to be a stick-up kid. But since I was a father, age 17, I had to find out how to stick people up in tournaments legally by winning grand championships. And that's what created my vocation. Even though I started teaching right here in the Head Start, that's where I started in 1981, 82.
My first gig was in St. Mark's Church on 120-something Street in Harlem, right there near 135th Street. I was charging about maybe $25 a class, or was it $25 an hour? I think it was $25 a class. Yeah.
Again, guys. So again, just giving you some history of our interaction, and what I say is this. Look forward to a whole bunch more. Starting tomorrow. Actually, today's Monday. 5 days from now, we're going to launch a thing called SniperFight.com. What do you think about that?
I'm excited. Innovation at the highest level, so we can be able to give more value to people, There's so much, like I said, we got so much in us from training over the years, that we haven't even expressed yet. And I'm just excited about it because everybody want to grow,
Yeah, we're going to throw tournaments that the 40 and above division, man. I think that a lot of people, honestly, at age 40, which is still young, my son's 40.
Yeah.
They should really think about longevity and getting in shape. To me, if I don't compete in the tournament, if I don't have a competition, I don't want to train. So for those of you who are competitive and you were as a child, we're going to have a tournament circuit that's going to actually be 40 and above. I'm going to start it off with that. And I've been thinking about it because I think that, the elders, so to speak, are the ones that need the most help to stay motivated and so on and so forth. And plus, a lot of them never had a chance to become the champions that they should have been. Like I can honestly say that even though I've won a lot of stuff, guys, I probably did about 10% of what I wanted to do. And I want to, try to make the most out of the rest of my life. So, and I'm officially announced this. I do not want to fight against kids in their 20s and 30s or even teens. Like let them win their championships. But I need some of my elders to come out and compete because you guys, you were my competitors back in the day. Why not now? I want to still play, but I don't want to feel like I'm a bully. And I do feel like a bully at times when I fight people that have been training for 5 years and they're in my age bracket and they don't know, it's not that I'm better than anybody. I just know things that actually work. How many different approaches to a reverse punch have you seen me set up?
About 5 or 6. Yeah.
And then sometimes I switch the pocket. What hand do I hit with? Right or the left?
Right and left.
Sometimes it's a hook punch, sometimes it's a reverse punch, sometimes it's an uppercut, sometimes it's a tricep kickback, sometimes it's over the top and then lifting the hand up. So there's a bunch of tricks.
Repositions and fakes. You make sure you listen to the song because he talks about that in one of the songs.
Anyway, I think we've been on long enough. At least you guys know this is Master Chai, who officially.
I think there's some comments in there.
Yeah, there'll be quite a few of them, guys. I'll absolutely respond afterwards. But realistically, it's Memorial Day, so in homage to those who have fallen. Martial arts is exactly what military is, and the military who have passed away is what today's dedicated to. But I'm excited.
Me too.
And we've done a lot of work. I must say that behind the scenes, a lot has been done. The website, I should say the school, because really what it is, has almost 4 hours worth of content that goes over some secrets. And it's for the purpose of making all of us who know the curriculum, be able to take things to a whole other level. And I want to start with the 40 and above market because they're the ones that really need to be inspired. Now, this is the thing. The goal is to motivate the educated. I want to motivate the educated, and I want to educate the motivated. Motivate the educated and educate the motivated. Because there's people that want to do things, and I see they try so hard. And I'm like, no, man, you guys train harder than me. I just go with this curriculum that works.
That's right.
If we're going to warm up now and we do the left-right drill and then the circle drill, it works.
Many benefits too.
Then the hopscotch.
Cardiovascular.
Oh, it'll get you tired. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah.
And then we do slow-mo sparring. Imaginary sparring where you actually make believe you're hitting each other, which, believe it or not, there's benefits to that to warm up your motor skills and be aware of the target, offense and defense. And then we do spar in 3-point rounds, but sometimes the 3 points goes in like 30 seconds. Sometimes the 3 points.
Sometimes it's longer.
Yeah, it's a lot longer because you get to the point where the techniques don't work until you make a adjustment to it. Because quite often we hit each other. I hit him to the ribs, and there's not a rib there, so it's a fist. So we punching each other, and I make sure that if he scores on me, I thank him That's really what it is. If someone scores, then you got to thank them for showing the weakness in your defense, and thank God that it's in a controlled environment. Because in the street, that might have took you out.
Right.
You know, so that's the way. That's my mindset behind it. Anything else you want to add to it?
Well, just want to say thank you to everybody who'll be tuning in and giving your comments, and who've been supporting, because we couldn't do it without you. So continue to come through, and we just excited on your progress as well.
Yeah, we just begun.
Just begun.
All right, guys. On that note, honey, AB,
See ya!
we out of here. That's Miss Littlebird, of course. Thank you.